Today, we're unpacking the incredibly volatile conflict between the US and Iran. And this is a situation that is literally changing by the hour, with consequences that are already stretching way beyond the Middle East, affecting, well, everything from the global economy to internal politics. Okay, so let's start with a really surprising announcement that came out of the White House recently. A social media post from the president himself declared a 5-day pause on all military strikes against Iran. And on the surface, wow, that sounds like a major step back from the brink of a full-on war, right? But you gotta ask the question, was this a genuine olive branch, a real move toward peace? Or was there maybe another motive here? Is this really about de-escalation, or could it be about trying to soothe the financial markets? To really get what's going on, we have to look at what the official statement says versus what's actually happening on the ground. And here's where it gets interesting. The White House is claiming there are productive conversations underway, but on the other side, crickets. Total silence from Iranian diplomatic sources. There's been zero evidence, absolutely no confirmation that any of these talks are even happening. And look, there's a reason people are skeptical about this. There's a bit of a pattern here of conflicting messages. It was only a few weeks ago that the president said the war was ending. At the exact same time, his own Secretary of Defense was saying it was just getting started. These kinds of announcements often seem timed to cool down nervous markets. So why are the markets so jumpy in the first place? Well, it all comes down to this number, 20%. That's the share of the entire planet's oil supply that has to pass through one single narrow choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, which just happens to be right at the center of all this tension. So the bottom line is this. If that strait gets shut down for any serious amount of time, the fallout is going to be so much bigger than just gas prices. We're talking about something that could spark a truly severe global economic crisis. The stability of the whole world's economy is literally on the line here. Okay, so let's shift gears to the second key development. Because while there's all this talk about a pause, the conflict itself is doing the exact opposite. It's actually spreading out, geographically. And this is a huge deal. Iran recently launched missiles at a joint US-British base. That one move proves this is no longer just a regional squabble. And the target they chose was this place, Diego Garcia. You've probably never heard of it, and that's kind of the point. It's a tiny, remote, British-owned island just floating in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but its strategic value is just massive. So what makes it so special? Well, think of it as a giant, unsinkable aircraft carrier. From Diego Garcia, the US and UK can launch long-range bombers, they can store enormous amounts of weapons, and coordinate military ops across 3 different continents. Its isolation is its superpower, letting them project force from thousands of kilometers away, far from any front lines. It's been called a silent support point, a truly fundamental piece on the military chessboard. So for Iran to attack a base like this, a critical, behind-the-scenes asset, that represents a really significant and very calculated escalation. All right, now let's look at another one of these major ripple effects. Let's talk about the consequences of this conflict inside Iran itself. Because as the fighting on the outside gets louder, the Iranian regime seems to be using the war as a cover to ramp up a very different battle, a battle against its own people. This timeline lays out a really disturbing chain of events. So before the war even kicked off, back in January 2026, you had these huge protests sweep across Iran. After those were brutally put down, the regime is now, under the fog of war, carrying out executions of people who were arrested way back then. And this, unfortunately, points to a pretty grim pattern you see throughout history. When authoritarian regimes face an external threat to their power, they often become more ruthless at home, using the war as an excuse to just crush any and all domestic opposition. Okay, for our final point, let's zoom the camera all the way out to the global chessboard and just ask a simple question. Beyond the US and Iran, who actually wins and who loses from all this growing chaos? The geopolitical fallout is pretty complicated, but there are some clear winners and losers emerging. For China, it's a mixed bag. A distracted US is a strategic plus, but a chaotic global economy really hurts their export-heavy model. For Russia, on the other hand, it's a clear win. All this disruption drives up oil prices, which means more demand for Russian energy, and it weakens the sanctions against them. And the biggest loser? It's looking like the European Union, which is now facing a really severe energy crisis. All of this leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. We are literally watching the ripples of this conflict spread,
economically, geographically, and politically. But you have to wonder, is there anyone out there who can actually stop these ripples before they turn into a tidal wave?